Hey everyone, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Things that's happening on the front lines just don't stop. They keep speeding up and escalating. And this is the moment where I like what I'm doing here right now the most. Usually when there is a significant development on the map, then everyone can see, everyone has eyes. So when there's a huge swathes of territory being liberated, well, you just need to open the map and be approximately on the same level as any other analyst. Right now, at the current moment, a lot of things are happening, but not a lot of people know about them and not a lot of people are updating. So I'm right here for you to take care of all of the things. Let's start with the part of the front line that interests people the most, which is the Orikhiv direction, where Ukrainians are, as you can see, are penetrating the first defense line of Surovikin. So this is the big trench line. This is where they have the pyramids. This is where they have the anti-tank ditches. This is major things. I've told you last week that some of the initial forces of Ukrainians made it through and started probing the area around Verbove. Now we know that Ukrainians are 100% confirmed already in these trenches, and now they're widening the gap. They are pushing the Russians out. And here I want to start a little bit back. So I'm going to put the map in a little bit of a couple of days before territory. And I want to explain what's the battle plan for Russians. In Russian doctrine, one of the things that they do when they have a breach of their fortified positions, fortified lines, then instead of trying to specifically fortify the point of entry of the forces, so in this case, we know that Ukraine is trying to enter here. What Russian doctrine and what they're trying to do is they're trying to instead fortify the flanks. So instead, they want to put people in this place, and they want to put people in this place, and potentially people in this place. Why is that? So when the enemy will force itself through the defensive positions, then the purpose of these fortified areas is to start sending and creating a pressure behind the spearhead of the enemy that is breaching through the positions. So the goal of Russians, what's their battle plan, is to push into these directions and potentially also this direction here and maybe this direction here to try to close that pocket. So even if Ukrainians make it through, then to try to close it behind them. That is the battle plan of Russians. This is what we are seeing happening right now. So all of these reinforcements that were coming in from the Russian side that I reported upon last week and so on have been dedicated on the sides of Ukrainian breach, and we're trying now to squeeze Ukrainians from that side. The counter to that would be for Ukrainians to come into this breach and then try to secure their flanks, so expand their flanks to one area and expand their flanks to the other area. In that sense, widening the gap and preventing Russians from ever closing this pocket down. Now, if we just now turn it off away, this was from 25th of August. Now knowing the battle plans, we're going to advance the time, and you can see exactly what is happening. So the Russian plan at this moment we see is failing. The strategy of Russians, what they wanted to do, is not working. Ukrainians are not being stopped. We see that Ukrainians indeed made a penetration. Just today, right now, the map is still have not updated. We have received news that Ukrainians were able to additionally liberate this part of the area. And we know for sure that Ukrainians have been successful taking some of the local tactical heights right over here. I believe it was height named 166. It doesn't really matter. The point is, Ukrainians took a significant strategic, tactical, this is all small level, and they're pushing down these trenches, therefore widening the gap. So what we can say from sure that whatever Russian plan was on a tactical level to outplay Ukrainians, it failed, so they will resist. They will try to stop and slow down Ukrainians, but we see that on a tactical level, the command level, Ukrainians are outplaying this. And right now, Ukrainian focus is as I will remind you, is to try to get Verbovo cut off from supplies, because Verbovo is the weak point of Russians in this defense. If Verbovo falls, more like when Verbovo falls, then Ukrainians will have, basically, they can go wherever they want. There is many directions, and all of them are extremely bad for Russians. That's the situation on Orikhiv axis. Second change on the front line that happened during this week, Ukraine have started applying a lot more pressure. I already explained to you that there is pressure that is happening on the Kherson area. It's not stopping. There are still reports there that the Ukrainians are applying a lot of pressure from the boats, but still no major crossings of Dnipro so far. What is interesting instead is Ukrainians applying pressure in the points that they did before. This is great news, because Russians were super focused on this Orikhiv direction. This is where Russians are thinking Ukrainians will strike with all their force. So they have been bringing a lot of forces into this area. To which Ukraine responds, okay, we're going to apply pressure in this area. And we hear that Ukrainians have indeed reinforced Kamyansk, and now there are pressure that is applied on this point here. Then we also hear around the area of Staromayorsk and Urozhaine that Zavitne Bazhanye over here, there is also pressure applied. Not as much, I will give it to you, but most of the pressure that's surprising for Russians especially is the pressure around Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk. This is extremely important, because this is another potential weak point for the Russians. If Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk, and by current accounts that we're hearing that Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk do feel that they do look that they might crumble, then Ukrainians will be able to enter the flanks of whatever Russian forces are here in Pavlivka. And that is crucial, because all of this position, Russians, to put it lightly, during the Russian offensive in winter, they needed to take this. At Russian offensive, there is this small settlement of Vuhledar. This small settlement is a big problem for Russians, because while Ukrainians are controlling the settlement, Russians cannot engage this part of the railway network. So they're not able to deliver the cargo as efficiently. You can think about this like this. Without this network enabled, then Russian forces, they are forced to deliver the goods by rail through the Kerch Bridge like this. So you can say that they are running with one leg tied. That's how they are defending, and their logistics are in the south. So it's very shaky. If Russian would be able to take Vuhledar during the winter offensive, then that whole situation on the south wouldn't be as threatening, because right now it is threatening. There is only one way of getting the goods in the proper quantities, because Russian logistics are still extremely dependent on the railway networks. But that also creates significant problems for the Russians. This is, if you can see very closely, while not completely accurate, I've explained a lot that this black trench network doesn't really represent. But you clearly see that a lot of effort went into building these fortifications and not as much into this. And this, while not completely accurate because we cannot see everything from satellite, generally speaking, it shows where the efforts were. And if Ukrainians are able to breach Pavlivka, Yehorivka, firstly, you can see that there is not a lot of settlements in the area. That's mostly fields. And secondly, if Ukrainians are indeed successful and they're able to flank this and collapse this position towards Vuhledar and are able to get back close towards these lines, that is going to be really bad for Russians, because that's not going to put one leg behind them. That is going to put a lot more pressure on them, because right now, while railway network is not operational, this highway is. So that is the danger for Russians. Ukrainians are applying a lot of pressure points, and the problem is that the Russian forces are being stretched more and more. And now, wherever it's breaking, nothing good comes of it. So, as I explained many times, that while we don't see huge land liberation yet, firstly, there is a good chance that it comes. And secondly, there is right now a lot that can go wrong for Russians. And that is why I'm very optimistic, and that is why a lot of political figures and everyone else explained and came public saying that, hey, you just don't understand Ukrainian plan. In a military sense, they're doing quite well. So I'm hoping that the discussion that it's not really going well will stop quite soon. On the other flanks, around Bakhmut, here things slow down. We hear that Ukrainians have been fighting with Russians around Klishivka for a while now, because there has been significant reinforcements always sent to Klishivka. However, today there were videos appeared that Russians were fleeing Klishivka under the shelling from the cluster munitions. And this is the same that we saw before. So Russians overstayed their welcome inside of that settlement, and I would not be surprised if it's finally considered to be controlled by Ukrainians. But all in all, right now, the defense lines of Russians are going alongside the railway, which is going here, and Ukrainians are applying pressure. But again, there is not a lot of additional Ukrainian forces. There are pressure points here and there, tactical fighting in pretty much all of the areas, but nothing that we should be aware of. What we should be aware of is Russians have re-engaged their offensive, and reports are from Sinkivka that they're again trying to put pressure towards Kupiansk direction. And we already kind of know that it would happen. And the problem with this part, specifically from the north, that not a lot of videos are coming from the north side, almost at all. While from the south side, we're getting at least drone footage. From the north side, I only have my personal contacts and some of the people in Ukraine that I know that are able to relate. There is very little information that is coming from that area. That is the situation on the front lines. All in all, Ukraine is doing really well. The offensive, as I was explaining and saying, we still have over a month time, if we're taking mid-October, for Ukrainians to see where it ends up, or at least how successful Ukrainians are. Ukrainians have fully confirmed breached the Surovikin first defense line. There is now the second line, and if they take Verbove, then Russians are in a world of pain. Ukrainians have the time. The Russians and Russian reserves are slowly but surely depleting. Everything will be Ukraine. Slava Ukraini, guys, I love you. Please join our Discord, because there was some accident that some of the less active users were deleted. So please come back to us. Let's talk about this. Let's support Ukraine. I love you all. I love moderators. See you next time.